ಬಿಸಿ ಕಾಫಿ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು
Yes, sir, it's 5:59. We're just broadcasting the event. Within a minute, I think we'll start. Just
then I would say good evening, and then
yeah, just a minute. People will
speak
start
first,
coming.
Mr. Gopale. Sorry, Mr. Gopalakrishna, and then this is the 6th edition, no? RCPA's Risk
and Compliance Professionals Association.
So are we broadcasting?
Yeah, we have broadcasted. Just 1 minute. People have joined. Another 5-10 will join and we'll start. 1 minute.
84 participants. Wow, very nice.
It's already 84.
Yes. Oh, till its century. Going up fast. 100 is the limit, folks.
So maximum 100.
It's a tatkal going on now. It's like a tatkal last.
Arre baapre. Really great. This is like the full house chapter meeting.
Yeah.
I couldn't join twice. Somebody.
Acha.
Ho ja. 100 done. Wow.
Okay. Yeah. I think, sir, we'll start.
Yes.
Yeah.
6th edition, no?
Yeah.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening.
Shall I start?
Yes. Just 1 minute. I'll just. So welcome all ISACA Mumbai chapter member. So as our topic is on the bank today, and we have bank of experience there today as a speaker for us, almost a century of experience. Okay. So we have a privilege to have Mr. G. Gopalakrishna also. I'll ask Sundar Krishnan sir to just introduce all the speaker members. Sir, over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, ISACA Mumbai chapter. This is the 6th edition, online edition of ISACA Mumbai chapter. Really proud and privileged to be associated with that. And I was also past president, so I thank them for inviting me to introduce some esteemed panelists who joined us to speak on leveraging cyber security measures into fraud detection at banks. Being a chief risk officer of a large insurance company, I can tell you these are silos and you need to handle it very carefully and also need to bash the silo risk. Luckily, in my company, fraud prevention team and the cyber security team reports onto me, so I can link the dots, connect the dots. And it's really fruitful because otherwise you would waste a lot of time and duplicate efforts. Much more than that, you may not be sharper. You may miss links. You may not be able to connect the dots, and which is very important as a large enterprise or a bank, because you'll have to link or connect the dots. I think that's what is the topic about. It's a really innovative topic, and we're really privileged and honored to have Mr. G. Gopalakrishna, Director of Risk and Compliance Professional Association, Mumbai. I can tell you some background. I mean, you have dealt with him about 15 years back or 16 years back when he was in Central Bank or Reserve Bank of India, and he has championed our cause. And actually supported, and we are CISAs and proud to be CISAs of various banks and various other auditors have got opportunities for none other than Reserve Bank of India, and none other than Mr. G. Gopalakrishna was coordinating that. So I thought I should introduce him. And also he's been a chief guest in our conferences. He's a career central banker for over 37 years, executive director between 2007 to 14. And overseen most of the regulatory and supervisory departments, including DICGC. He was formerly director of KFRAL, promoted by RBI 2014 to 17. Headed working group on information security, risk management audit, cyber fraud, and recommendations of which were implemented by Reserve Bank in January 2011. Headed the RBI IBA committee on capacity building in banks and non-banks, and based on the recommendations, certification in 5 areas has been implemented by RBI and the IBA, Indian Banks Association. Chaired the GROW, which devised the supervisory rating system for risk-based supervision in 2012, authored the large value credit monitoring system in 2014, now called CRILC, chaired the committee on legal entity identifier, LEI, which has since been implemented by RBI. He's currently director on the boards of few financial companies, apart from being, of course, spearheading this risk control professional association. So after I've introduced the other two esteemed speakers, I think Mr. Gopalakrishna, I would invite Mr. Gopalakrishna to speak a few words. But before that, I would also like to introduce other champion speakers out here. Mr. Mohan Bhatia, who's an MSc, ASCV, FRM, PGDST, but he's also been a speaker on Basel long back in chapter and in chapter conferences. His qualifications is numerous, so I don't want to waste time of yours going through. It'll be endless list of qualifications from MSc, ICMA, FRM, and CAIB, etc. He was founding and associate editor of Journal of Risk Model Validation, Risk Magazine, author of Economic Capital, author of Credit Risk Management, Auditing in Computerized Environment, Bank for Future Banking Technology, multiple consulting assignments in risk management, compliance, and financial crime, and has got 30 years of experience in risk and compliance and design and development and validation. He was being a chief risk officer, chief financial officer, MLRO, chief compliance officer. He's leading in automation, cognitive computing, data science initiatives. He's been nominated in Wipro as the distinguished member of technical staff, expert in machine learning and cognitive computing. He's been in last 14 to 15 years in Wipro as leading consultant technology risk officer at Japanese Bank, Tokyo. His other background is LIC, Reserve Bank of India, Infosys, Oracle, and Wipro. And then lastly, but not the least, we've got Mr. Pradeep Godbole. He was my senior in Ernst & Young. I've learned a lot from him. And he's also got more than 3 decades of experience in banking, financial services, business and technology consulting, auditing, accounting, and management experience. He's also been in the Big Four, EY, Oracle Financial Services, Wipro, and Deutsche Bank, independent director of South Indian Bank, chairman of IT Strategy Committee of the Board, director of Risk Compliance Professional Association, a Section 8 not-for-profit company focused on skills and capacity building initiatives. He's a consultant and advisor to financial institutions and technology companies in India. With a blend of experience in financial services and technology industry, Pradeep demonstrated thought leadership, practical insights in CXO suite interactions, and executed large business and technology projects at top-tier banking and financial services organizations across the world. As a part of his work, he has trained and mentored large teams and won multiple awards. That includes me also. He was my mentor too. And he's also a very great speaker and guest speaker at various forums. So with that, I would now invite Mr. G. Gopalakrishna to speak. And then Pradeep would take over, and then Mr. Mohan Bhatia would guide us through. I welcome Mr. G. Gopalakrishna once more to the sixth edition of the chapter.
Thank you, Sundar Krishnan, and thank you for making this forum available for RCPA. I've been talking to you for quite some time, and I'm very happy that it has finally happened. I would also like to thank Mr. Fernando, the president of the ISACA Mumbai chapter, and also Sanjeev Deshpande for coordinating this webinar. First of all, I would like to introduce about RCPA, which is a Section 8 not-for-profit company, which has been set up by banking professionals from the commercial banks, from the Reserve Bank, both retired as well as serving executives. This was incorporated in July 2019. The objective of RCPA is to create an Indian standard in risk and compliance, which is very crucial in the current atmosphere. Besides, we want to create more professionals in risk management and compliance. Of course, besides me, Pradeep Godbole is the other director of RCPA, and we have a very eminent governing council which is guiding us in our functioning, which includes Mrs. Meena Hemchandra, former executive director of RBI, Mr. Ajay Kumar, who is the retired CMD of Corporation Bank, Mr. Kamal Somani, chairman of the SPA Securities Group, Mr. Roy, Group Compliance Officer from Axis Bank, Prabhat Gupta from DSP India, Pushpendra Sharma, and many more. I'm very glad to inform that RCPA has already launched a program, online program known as Credit Risk Management Professional. It is a very, very detailed 15-module credit risk management program divided into 2 levels, associate and professional. We've already launched this program online, including classroom support. And we have very good experience because of COVID-19. We are now even holding the classroom online. So we have a lot of programs scheduled to be run during the period, which includes a program on compliance and risk management, fraud risk management using models, which is introduction which we are going to give today. And we also are planning to conduct digital risk management program for both senior management as well as middle-level management officers in banks, financial institutions. Kindly refer to our website, www.rcpa.in for more details. So before I request Pradeep and Bhatia to speak about the topic of today's, namely leveraging cyber risk measure into fraud detection at banks, I'd like to give a broad introduction of the frauds in India. Being a former regulator and supervisor, I have a lot of inputs, and I thought I can share at this moment. Of course, Mohan Bhatia is going to make a detailed presentation on the cyber fraud area. In fact, I've been associated with ISACA for quite some time, as Sundar rightly pointed out. And I also had the privilege of visiting the headquarters of ISACA Chicago in 2017 when I was in the Air Force for some assignment. And I met all the headquarters people, including Mr. Matt at the time, who was the chief executive officer. He is still in touch with me in LinkedIn and other forums. Like this, I was advising them for some time, the headquarters, on rolling out their cyber security programs in India for almost a year. So coming to the topic of fraud, before I hand over to Mr. Pradeep and Bhatia, financial fraud is a big challenge to the banking and financial sector because of the huge amount involved. I'll share with you some of the concerns and amount. Although in terms of volume, the financial frauds are not big. In terms of amount, it is almost 85 to 90%. And so with these few initial remarks, I would like to now hand over the sessions to Pradeep.
Sir, just before that, this is Sundar Krishnan again.
Yeah.
There is a question for you. How can PMLA Act help in cyber fraud related to money siphoned off, looking at enforcement or compliance of regulatory requirements?
Yeah. So PMLA frauds, of course, the numbers are increasing day in and day out with the use of whatever methods. Of course, phishing used to be common. Now, phishing is the most common method. And I'm sure Mr. Mohan is going to cover in a bigger way. But at this stage, I can say that, yes, it is a major concern for the banks. And RBI has started imposing penalty for KYC AML violation left and right. In the recent past, almost every bank, name every bank in the last 1 year have been penalized because most of the banks, despite 2011 guidelines and 2016 guidelines of RBI, many banks are still not created a SOC which monitors 24/7. And this is one of the, see, when you have banking happening 24/7, if you say that I will monitor only during working hours, it is not going to work. SOC, even today, I can tell you very few big banks have SOC. Otherwise, all of them have either outsourced it to some agencies, or only the dump is taken and monitored after a gap. I'm very happy to note that many of the Indian banks, especially public sector banks, are now very conscious of online frauds. Today, I can share that SBI is almost monitoring 24/7, and whenever there is any small issue in credit card use, immediately you get an alert, which in the past none of us would have expected. Of course, most of the private sector banks are doing this job very well. But I'm very glad to know that now more and more private sector public sector banks are also doing 24/7 monitoring. Similarly, Mohan is going to share with you, last 10 years, IBA, RBA has been saying, please create scenarios and incorporate in your early warning system for fraud monitoring. Even today, I can vouchsafe that many of the banks have not incorporated these alerts. And that is how many of the, of course, in terms of value, it is very, very negligible. But in terms of reputation, in terms of confidence of the customers in the banking system, cyber fraud is a major, major issue. I'm sure we'll have more discussion on this topic.
Thanks a lot, sir, for sparing your valuable time. Of course, there is one very senior member has asked a question that all the banks have implemented the committee recommendations of 2011. I guess the answer is unanimous yes. Everybody has implemented the 2011 recommendations.
Yeah, I'm very happy that to a greater extent it is coming to our rescue, particularly the BCP, which most of the banks have built post 2005 flood in Mumbai. I'm sure there is going to be a very, very robust BCP in the banking system. And I was told even RBI is now operating at an undisclosed place with almost 150 people, 24/7. And I'm sure most of the banks also would have replicated this module by this time. And as early as March first week, I circulated a paper on how to run banks in times of COVID 2018, 2019. And many banks acknowledge that, yes, they have already implemented in their organization.
Thank you, sir. That was Shri Gopalakrishna of the famous Gopalakrishna committee, uh, which we all ISACA members are very, very proud and privileged to be associated with. And with that, I hand over the screen to Mr. Pradeep Godbole.
Thank you, Sundar. Thank you, Gopalakrishna, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
very
you.
clear.
First of all, thank you, ISACA Mumbai chapter, for giving us this opportunity. Before jumping further, I would like to go back to the table which Gopalakrishna sir was showing you. And if you look at the figures which are there, all frauds, we don't have the figure of cyber frauds for 2018 or 19 subsequent to that. But if you look at the figures which are there, in terms of number, you will find that it's a sizable number, which are above 1 lakh and above, right? But if you look at the percentage, it will be less than 1%, right? One of the reasons why this anomaly has happened is that previously, as Gopalakrishna sir was saying, the banks were not submitting the data below 1 lakh. Now RBI is pushing them to submit the data even for
now I understand
license.
RBI is getting all the cyber fraud below 1 lakh also, and I will also share shortly some figures. Yeah.
So this is one of the reasons. That question, if you would have observed, it would have come to your mind. So I thought I'll clear that up. So before pushing further, first rule of risk management is that you need to know what is the risk and how to measure that particular risk, right? So first, let's look at where the risk is lying, right? And what we are observing, especially since last 5 years, is that there is an explosion and expansion of the digital channels which we are having. So I'm just giving you some figures here on this slide. So we have got more than 2 lakh ATMs. We have got 56 crores internet users. So if you take India's population, it's almost 50% of the population is already on the internet in some shape and form, right? And many of them are using online banking for their transactions. 25 million mobile banking users, more than 49 lakhs POS machines which are there, more than 8 crore debit cards, more than 5 crore credit cards which are there. So all these are used very, very extensively for transactions nowadays. The usage what we had before, say 5 years back, and usage today has exponentially gone up. So if you look at the figures, these are the per month figures which are there. And you can see that what is the transactions which are there, which are in million, and the volume is in rupees billions. So RTGS is 107,000 billion worth of transactions are done in a month, right? And you look at the mobile banking, 106 billion transactions are done in a month, right? And look at the figure of the transactions, the value of the transactions. So this is a clear-cut area where the risk lies for the banking and financial institutions. One sort of, we have been talking to various banks as part of our career, and one point which we noticed is that almost more than 50% of the transactions now and more than 30% of the services, they are done real-time online basis, and the transactions are happening online, and there is it does not have a repudiation facility. So once you do the transaction, you are committed. So the money, once it is taken out, it is gone. So that is the kind of risk which is there, that we are dealing in a real-time transaction scenario much more than what we were talking before, right? So that is one area which is there, and 90% of the frauds which are there in the cyber risk, they will relate to the payments area, is what we have observed as a result of the conversations. You also may be knowing this famous saying that if there is a motive and there is an opportunity, it's a ripe case for fraud. So this is one case. Because of the sheer volume of transactions which is there, there is a ripe possibility for the fraudsters to indulge into any kind of fraudulent activities which are there. The problem in case of country like India is even more, because the branches are spread across the country, these ATMs are spread across the country, the users are also spread across the country. So it is a much more challenging situation for a country like India to monitor all these channels which are there. And if you look at these numbers which are there, right, you cannot have a sort of transaction-based controls which are there. The transaction-based controls will work to prevent the transaction, but there will be some anomalies, some kind of fraud which will happen, and you need to have the analytics which will help you detect that anomaly and take corrective action on this. So this is one of the major drivers why you will need to have the cyber analytics. And how to build that analytics, Mohan sir will cover in the next section. The other point, along with this explosion of digital channels, there are few other things are also which is changing at the same time. And we already, all of us are using desktop, laptops, iPad, like a daily necessity nowadays. But all these applications also have got hardware or software vulnerabilities which are there. And you would have seen the news items which are there, where some of the solutions or the software which are there, they had the security bug which was exploited by the fraudsters, right? The other important change which has happened in last 5 years is that mobile has become all pervasive. We can't live without mobile, right? From our contacts to SMS to mails to banking, everything is done through mobiles. We also use it for entertainment. We download all kinds of applications on this particular instrument. And it might be possible that the bank is taking a good care for on its own side, but the user may download something which may be having a harmful effect from the transactions what it is doing. So the user's phone may be used, his activities may be tracked by this harmful programs that downloaded it by mistake or unintentionally, and sometimes even he will not know that that program is monitoring his actions or activities, right? So mobile has become one of the major threat areas as far as the cyber risk is concerned. Other problem that financial institutions, including other institutions, are allowing the employees to get their own devices. Again, the same risk like the mobile phone will lie over here. If the employee has downloaded something, he has clicked on some email in his personal mailbox, the computer or his instrument may be infected, right? So that is one other area which is causing some heartburn over here. Social media, I don't have to say anything about it. All of you know it. There is nothing private now with the social media which is there. Everything is known to the frauds, right? From your name, address to date of birth, everything is known. You publish your photo on your birthday, the fraudster will know that today is your birthday, right? So that kind of information which is gathered by all these social media tools, and the fraudsters are targeting the social media companies to gather that information. Few other cases where the frauds have happened in recent time is by hacking into the Wi-Fi infrastructure. Everybody is tech savvy, and the fraudsters have actually used the Wi-Fi infrastructure to hack into the network and use that network to do the fraudulent activities. So when the fraud was detected, it happened in a case in New Mumbai a few years back, that when the activity was traced, it was traced to an unsecured Wi-Fi which was used to do the transaction, right? So that is one of the other sort of vulnerability which is emerging. Cloud computing, most of our emails are nowadays in cloud. A lot of applications also now are residing in cloud. So a lot of data is in cloud. And one of the reasons why the cyber frauds are happening is also due to the unsecured cloud infrastructure which is there. This was in fact pointed out as one of the major reasons in the CERT-in report. CERT-in is the authority in India for the digital risk management, and they have published a report, and this is one of the reasons what they have called out as a reason for cyber frauds. Internet of Things, again, it's a new concept which has come in, and now what you can do is that two instruments can talk with each other without any interface. So through your mobile, you can actually interact with your refrigerator, order the food. That kind of sophistication is there. The sophistication is useful, but that sophistication also exposes you to the risk, right? So that is one other factor which is there. And last but not the least, the managed service providers. So a lot of activities are being outsourced to the vendors, the suppliers which are there. And the fraudsters are not only targeting the financial institutions, but they are also targeting the the service providers which are there, who could be software service providers, who could be the process service providers, who could be providing the other services to the organization. But all these are doors which are there. So it is like your house having multiple doors to enter, right? So these are some of the doors which are there through which the fraudsters can enter and enter without your notice. Now, the problem does not stop over here, because you may have employees which are running into hundreds of thousands. Large organizations will have hundreds of thousands of employees. So each employee, whenever he is accessing the bank's resources, the bank's financial systems or bank's email system, anything which he does, it can also compromise the bank's security system. Same case with the suppliers or the vendors who are there. A lot of things are outsourced. If any of these vendor clicks say a phishing email link, right, it will expose the financial institution to the risks, cyber risks which are there, which may not be known immediately. It will take maybe a longer time to notice all these things which are there. So the third element in this case, and this I have observed in real time in the bank where I have been associated, is that the customers itself sometimes they share their OTP or CVV or their personal details to the person who is calling on the other side. You might have heard this about this web series which is there, Jamtada. There is a town which is there in the eastern part of India where people specialize in extracting the information out of the fake phone calls which are there. You feel that the phone call is coming from the bank, but they are trying to extract the information out of it, right? So that kind of a thing is also there. And last but not the least, there are external parties who are also interested doing the fraud, right? So that they are one of the other things, apart from employees, the supplier or the vendors or the customers who are there. The external parties are also there, and this problem is now more complex because there are state and non-state actors are also participating along with these fraudsters. They are encouraging the fraudsters to hack into the bank's IT systems or hack into the customers' records. And that is what they are trying to extract the mileage out of the information which is extracted. The financial institution itself are the right case for cyber frauds because first of all, the money is there to take it away. So that's the first motivation which is there. Second is the customer data, which is valuable. If you have take away the customer data, that can be sold in the gray market. And you might have heard that in dark web, the credit card details are available as low as $10. There is actually a fraud as a service kind of a mechanism which is happening under the gray dark web as it is called, right? So that is the second motivation which is there. And the third motivation is third reason is the large volume of digital transactions what we talked about. So these are the factors. If you have to build the analytics, you have to be aware where is my threat going to come from, and then you can take some corrective action about, or preventive action or a detective action about it, right? So the bank, their bit in terms of the preventive mechanisms, in terms of having the tools and technologies which are there, but still these type of problems do arise. You might have also heard that the banks, some of the banks have actually offered a e-lock type of facility. What it does is that when you don't want to use your mobile phone or mobile banking or internet banking or a ATM card, you can actually lock your all the channels with one, and with that nobody will, as long as that account is under the locked stage, none of the channels will be allowed to be used. So the banks are also trying to do their bit in terms of preventing the frauds. But having done that, still there is a good chance and a greater than 50% chance that the fraudsters will be able to break into the IT systems of the bank. And as a, you can see that there are multiple millions of ways through which the fraudsters can enter into the bank system. Now, if you look at the recent frauds which have happened, so I tried to bifurcate them into two categories. One, which are targeted towards the customers to get the financial gains. So the fraudster will try to get a virus on the customer's instrument. They will try to do key logging type of stuff. They will try to steal the identity, or unauthorized access, or hacking, or phishing, wishing. All of you are security professionals, so you would have heard these terms. I will not go in greater detail these terms, but these are of the mechanisms or the methods which have been very, very frequently used by the fraudsters who are there. On the other side, on the bank side, the problem is twofold. One, they will lose the money, and the other is the reputational damage which will be there. And the third risk is the customer experience because of the disruption in service. So there have been sort of targeted attempts which have been made by the fraudsters, and that is where the state and non-state actors are joining hands with the fraudsters. So they are trying to do denial of service, distributed denial of service type of attack. Advanced persistent threat. All of you must have heard about the Cosmos Bank case, right? So in this particular case, the fraudsters had entered into the bank system. They were observing the activities in the bank system. They were trying to find the loophole for almost months together. What I'm told is that they were looking at it for more than 6 months before they actually struck and took away almost 94 crores out of that bank, right? So which is a very big amount for a bank like a Cosmos Bank. It may not be big for some of the public sector banks, but it's very big for a bank like a Cosmos Bank. Now the banks which don't have a very sophisticated infrastructure, those are prone to this type of risk which is there. One other thing which you also might be aware is that in case of advanced persistent threat, what is happening is that it sometimes takes more than 50 days to find out that somebody has entered the system and is trying to spy on the information assets or the data of the organization which is there, right? So that time lag from the entry today and till say 50 days, you don't even know that some thief has entered your house. It is that kind of situation which is there. The next is the data theft. You have been hearing all these cases all the while that the fraudsters have accessed the data and stolen the customer records which is there. And last, the intellectual property theft, trying to get the confidential information from the bank. So these are some of the motives which are there. The financial fraud has been the main motive on the individual side. On the bank side, the financial institution side, it has been multifold. So it has been the money plus the disruption plus the customer impact plus the reputational sort of damage which will be there. So to conclude, if you look at it, you have the vulnerabilities in million ways. Your transaction volume is increasing. The fraudsters are getting sophisticated. So you need to have the mechanism to monitor these anomalies or the sort of trends which are there on a continuous basis. get some intelligence out of it. So what is required is not monitoring. What is required is the intelligent monitoring is required. Not just monitoring is enough now. It has to be intelligent. That intelligence should be actionable. That will be the next requirement which will be there. And if you have to build this type of stuff, the financial institutions are not in a very, very matured stage at this point of time. They are doing the best, but the fraudsters are also finding ways and means. And as Sir said, with COVID-19, I'm sure they will, all the fraudsters also will be on the overwork mode to try to take advantage of the lesser staff, the constraints which are there in the operations which are there, right? So that is what is the sort of thing. One of the other observation, and which is where Mohan sir will try to get us the knowledge, is that typically what we have observed in the financial institution space is that there is a separate fraud monitoring unit which is there, which does the investigations relating to the frauds which are reported. Cyber risk related investigations are typically handled by the IT teams which are there. And the credit related frauds will be handled by maybe the auditing team which are there. So the investigation responsibility or the monitoring responsibility is actually divided between these three parties. And these three parties hardly talk to each other. So the person who is doing the fraud investigation does not know that this particular customer also had a sort of alert which was relating to a cyber risk. There was a case where he was there was a attempt which was made to take the money out from a location where the customer is normally not transacting, right? So that kind of a intelligence is not available to the guys who are doing the financial fraud analysis, and vice versa also. If some customer has complained to you that it's a fraud, and already there is a fraud related investigation which is happening against the customer, you have the intelligence internally. But unfortunately, in today's times, that case is not there. Organizationally, the responsibility is split. The tools and the technologies also which are there, they are split between these three teams. The data is not shared. So as a result of it, there is no 360-degree view as we require in case of fraud management, because the fraudsters will be trying to take the money out of the financial institutions. Unless you have a 360-degree view of the customer or any kind of anomalies which are happening. For example, if the customer is based in Mumbai and suddenly you see that he's transacting from, say, a foreign country, right? So that should give an alert, and possibly it should stop the transaction. Now, some of the mechanisms are built in case of, say, card companies have built the mechanism. In some cases, the banks have built the mechanism. But there is a lot to do in terms of building this analytics which is there. So with that, I'll take a pause here, and I'll request Mohan sir to now articulate as to how that integration can happen between fraud management and cyber risk systems which are there, the two, and shake can happen, and how it can be done for the future 4.0 of the bank. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Pradeep Godbole. This is very interesting. And yes, silo risks need to be bashed in large banks and large enterprises. And as a chief risk officer of a large enterprise, I do that because the fraud risk and the cyber risk report to me, and then I can connect the dots. But yes, so now we would hear now Mr. Mohan Bhatia how to connect the dots using analytics, and I hand over to Mr. Mohan Bhatia.
Thanks, Sundar Krishnan, and thanks ISACA Mumbai chapter for this opportunity. So what I will do is in the next whatever time is available, some 45 minutes to 1 hour, we'll try to see how this cyber risk vectors, they can be managed to control the frauds. So we'll try to understand the cyber risk more, and how cyber risk management can be leveraged for managing frauds in bank, specifically managing payment fraud in bank. So we just heard volume wise, last data available, more than 1/3 fraud cases are cyber or payment related fraud cases. So customer access their banking accounts, they access their BFSI services using devices, and these devices may be mobile, laptop, desktop, ATM, networks, POS, etc. And these devices are actually connected through network to the banking servers. And we can call this entire arrangement and system of devices and network together as channel. And we know that as a part of cyber and security expert, each of the channel and each component on the channel is actually exposed to vulnerability. And these may be inherent vulnerability. So we know that different devices, different networks, different type of applications, they've got different inherent vulnerability, as well as it can be the residual vulnerability. So vulnerability which even after plugging, some of them are still there and they have not yet been plugged, either because of deficiency in the technology, or they have not been detected, or the solutions are costly. So what we can say is that this point of use or the channel is, it can be remote. It can be remote like ATM, or it can be a device which may be provided by merchant, or it can be a device which can be owned by a customer. And for each one, vulnerability again are different. So as Pradeep was giving an example of a merchant and credit card and others, that vulnerability are different. Vulnerability in mobile and internet banking applications are different. Vulnerability in ATM, etc., they are all different. And what we need to do is we need to understand vulnerability which are very specific to each of the device and each of the network. And within device also, we know that within device, within application, the way the application is built, that entire architecture and information flow and the way security layer is implemented, that also will be different. So even though a bank may be using even the same product from the same product provider, but the way they implement internet banking or mobile, so their vulnerability will be different. So like cyber risk is actually nothing but operational risk. Fraud is nothing but operational risk. So it impacts basically the financial outcome, and this financial outcome get further accentuated by the behavior of merchants, by the behavior of devices, by the behavior of customers, and so on. And so when we talk about fraud, we actually are talking broadly two types of risk vectors. One is the risk vector which comes from cyber, from devices, from network, from channels, and other we can call them actually as a risk profiles, which are the intentional thing, which are the process related thing, which are the motivational related thing, which are done by
excuse me, Mr.
merchants
Mohan,
and others.
Mr. Mohan, shall I launch the poll?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Say for example, in case of credit card, we have we know that credit card holder is not supposed to hand over the card for swipe. But we know that if he hands over the card for swipe, what will happen? That CVV number and card number will get stolen, and so there is a chance, there is a probability that in card not present transactions may be inserted, because now CVV number is there and card number is there, and many of the internet transactions, many of the e-commerce transactions are card not present transactions. So this type of behavior further accentuates, basically it further accentuates the risk, it further accentuates the fraud risk, and so on and so forth. Same thing, we can extend this logic to further. So when we actually start monitoring, when we start monitoring fraud, or when we start building fraud models, or when we start building fraud applications, we need to actually leverage the data available from cyber risk side, as well as data available from the profile side. So data available from the profile side also is very important. For example, taking this example ahead again, that if there is a transaction, if we know that merchant profile and it is a risky profile, and maybe that merchant is dealing in alcohol, and alcohol is getting paid at the odd hours, and if such type of payment has already taken place, then the chances that card would have been handed over and somebody might have stolen CVV and card number are very high. So any large transactions which comes for CNP, for the card not present in the next few days, in next 3 days, in next 5 days, etc., in the vicinity of the merchant, etc., probably in the vicinity of merchants' IP addresses, etc., probably that need to be actually marked as a higher risk transaction. So these are some of the examples which we can say, and the way actually fraud provider solutions, actually they have designed their solution is actually based on this simple logic, that they get a lot of data and information from cyber, and on top of it they superimpose the profile, they superimpose profile of merchant, they superimpose profile of customer, they superimpose profile of customer relationship, and so on and so forth. So coming back to this slide, actually the point of use, the session, the account, merchant, customer relationship, these are the 6 risk vectors which are actually important. Out of that, point of use and session, these are the 2 risk vectors which actually gets collected as a part of the logs on the system, as a part of operating system, as a part of network, as a part of database, as a part of application, as a part of security log, as a part of customer behavior log, and so on and so forth. So these logs, actually we need to capture those logs, we need to analyze those logs, and we need to action upon those logs. Now in taking this story further, now for example, when we talk about that there is a customer and customer is having a location, so there will be an IP address. IP addresses, we know that they are actually mapped to the location. So what needs to be done is that capture those IP addresses, capture those locations, map it to that, find out the behavior, find out the delta and anomaly, what is happening, and if there are anomalies and other things, capture that, go through, do the calibration, go through the behavior. See, what is happening is that a person may be having location, for example, he may be staying in Thane, but his office may be in Andheri. So over a period of time, the behavior, those IP addresses, etc., you can look at it. He may be visiting to parents in Nagpur frequently, etc. So over a period of time, if you start capturing the IP addresses from where they are, where a customer is logging, etc., and the exceptions and the time and the behavior and the merchant, etc., those anomalies can be detected. So one of the thing is that when you detect those anomalies, what do we do? That when we detect anomalies, what we do is that generally banks, for the customer service, etc., they make customer to re-authenticate. And some of the banks, for example, they dial out to the existing number, and then based on the existing number, they confirm whether this transaction is being really the genuine transactions, and post that confirmation, they actually allow that completion of transaction. So that efficiency in this re-authentication. Now this re-authentication may be by asking him to provide one more factor of authentication, or it can be actually again dialing in and asking that manually, or it can be done through bots and other things. What I will do is that I will pause here, and if there are any questions, please post those questions so that we can take those questions online.
Yes, sir. And already I shown the results of the poll also in front of your screen is there.
Mr. Bhatia, there are also Q&A in the screen down. You can see the questions and chats are there. So I think
Let me see if there are any questions.
Yeah.
Give me 1 minute.
Yeah.
Well, sir, Pradeep here, if you want to move to any particular slide, just let me know.
Yes, sure. So a couple of questions which I can take that here. Actually, in case we want to talk about the fintech security, then fintech security needs basically an integration. Fintech security can be two ways. One is that white labeling, and other is that when you are using them as a part of this, if you are white labeling, then you have to entirely put your own security layer. And the most important challenge which banks actually are facing is that the architecture, security architecture in the fintech and bank may be different, because fintech generally is designed with the simple security layers, etc., while bank may be having a very complex security layer so that they can do security at the most granular level. So generally there is a challenge specifically. That is the reason why generally banks, they actually take a lot of time when they want to do the white labeling of any of the fintech thing. I didn't understood this question, Craig Jamatra activities. Probably if you can redefine that question, that will be really good.
No, the comment was that Jamtara, while everybody knows that fraudsters are there, why action is not being taken against them? So I had responded that it's a very porous region and it's tough to crack. But the reply is that then none of the cyber frauds are traced. That's the question.
See, the best thing for us, as a part of being ISACA member, best thing for us is that we actually try to focus on how do we build our skills so that we build foolproof system as a part of this. Where we build a better proof system for our organization, for our bank, for our BFSI firm, for which we are actually working.
I just thought I would add, also as a chief risk officer of a large enterprise, I do connect with police officials and try and crack crime spots. But yes, it's not in our hands. Only thing is you can follow up vigorously. I do employ some ex-cops who are very good, and we have recovery targets of frauds. So I can tell you the KPIs are maybe 15:1 or 20:1 of the cost incurred. So it's very worthwhile to spend time on deterrence, and police people are good. I mean, but the problem is now everybody is busy with COVID and lockdown. Nobody would attend to cyber crimes, which is why goes back to what chairman of the session said, Mr. Gopalakrishna said, is that this is the best time for fraudsters of cybercrime, because people are busy with COVID and things like that. You'll have to be really careful. So that's what Mr. Bhatia is saying. Put in prevent controls and detect controls, which are stronger. Deterrent controls we can maybe tackle later. But when you are in an organization, you have to worry about all the controls. I agree with the questions.
Okay. Keep posting questions. I will again pass after a few minutes and take those questions. Thanks, Sundar.
Yeah,
I agree.
But yeah, there are two more questions. One is on the legacy systems, other is on the ATM technology. ATM, especially, as you may be aware.
I already responded.
Okay,
sorry. On these questions.
Okay, sorry. I'll leave it to now Mr. Bhatia to handle.
Okay. See, one of the most important challenge is the false positive, because there are so many alerts which get generated that many a times management loses confidence in the system. So they say that on the one side there are fraud which are happening, and on the other side there are so much false positive that customer, they get annoyed. That is the reason we need to actually consider this actually as a vector. Now vector basically measures the direction as well as magnitude. And if you take this actually as a vector, that if I'm changing a risk factor, if I'm changing a risk input, what impact it will have on both false positive as well as true positive, false negative as well as true negative, that is going to be the determinant. So what we need to do as a part of this entire exercise is to improve the calibration, is to improve the data sharing. So one of the questions which had come was that how do we actually leverage PMLA Act for this? So what is happening is that, as Mr. Gopalakrishna was also saying, that fraud is not taken as a crime as under the crime provision, but it is actually taken as a part of taken as a part of the contract. So it is basically and is not a criminal. It may not attract many times criminal provisions. So, but PMLA Act actually attracts the criminal provisions. So what is happening if you look at Europe, where GDPR is actually getting implemented? So sharing data for fraud is very difficult across. Sharing data for fraud is very difficult across the bank, etc. So what they actually are doing is they are actually sharing data against for their money laundering. So if you look at AML Directive 4 in Europe, that is allowing sharing data across the organization, across the country, and there is a protection from GDPR also. So very specifically that protection actually is available in the privacy also, and they actually need to actually they can share their data. And we know that fraud is nothing but a type of money laundering. What is money laundering? Money laundering is creating a non-transparency in the transaction. So fraud is nothing but a type of money laundering. So if we actually can bring the industry together, where they are able to share data, they are able to share negative data, they are able to share about the compromised data, then our calibration will improve, then our vectors will improve, then our results will improve, then the business case will improve. So why we are calling it actually as a vector, that is the primary reason, that calibration at this point, what is the direction of the change, is what we should be able to build and calibrate. I'll take pause here and probably look at the question.
A very interesting question. How much of cyber analytics is being performed on RTGS and NEFT channels to detect frauds?
See, cyber analytics, you look at the fraud figures which are available in the public domain. So since 2017, fraud numbers for cyber are not available. Number has shot up post demonetization in India. So NEFT and RTGS and UPI and all other that use actually has increased only in the past 2 to 3 years, and we don't have a number. So most of the organizations, they have started thinking, they have started working on building the cyber risk analytics and integrating it with the fraud. So that is what we are seeing across, that in different organizations across different country, they have started building and they have started. So there are different models. I'm reading the second question. There are different models. As long as people are ready to sell their privacy, this type of model will continue. And that privacy issue, as long as people are ready to put their photo, as Pradeep was saying, telling that this is my birthday, so that date of birth can be actually picked up. And you know that a lot of security questions are relating to date of birth. So as long as this will be there, and this question will continue. So that is number one. The number two is that whether it is a Cosmos Bank incident or it is a SWIFT incident in Bangladesh, or there are so many other fraud incidents which are happening here, which are relating to SWIFT and other things. What needs to be done is that we need to identify the risk vectors, and we need to work on improving the calibration of those risk vectors. I will again say, to be very frank, for all of us as a member of ISACA Mumbai, for all of us, there is a great demand outside for building that cyber analytics, for building those models, for doing the calibration. So if we can, actually, organizations have started thinking, have started building, are implementing, have started implementing this cyber analytics. If we can, and they have also started talking about, they have also started sharing, and they have started talking about how do they share data across the organization. And because GDPR type of act, including the Privacy Act in India, it is permitting banks to share the data, to share the fraud data across the organization. That calibration is going to improve. The cooperation and coordination is going to improve. So up till now, cyber analytics was not getting a lot of success and business case because the sharing of data was controlled. Over a period of time, this will start bottom up and banks will start building and sharing and other things. So with that happening, the models will improve, the cyber risk measurement will improve, and it will open up a lot of new opportunities. It is actually sitting there for opening up a lot of new opportunities, career opportunities for all of us. I'll take pass. So Sundar, you may like to add on what is happening on that data sharing. Specifically, I think that in UK, they have done that data sharing specifically within the insurance industry
Yes,
for
so
fraud.
they're very important because we've realized that I can tell you that the annual bill of insurance industry is 30,000 crores on frauds. So if we share data and we share with each other the intelligence, we're doing that right now as we speak. You can save 10% of the frauds minimum. So you straight away save 3,000 crores per year. Whereas to put up all this will require just some single digit or double digit crores. So industry has to get together, and of course there is data repository being set up, has been set up 3-4 years back now, and insurance companies are sharing the data with the repository and cutting out data feeds and analytics, running analytics, very intelligent ones, and saving lots of frauds. So I've built KPIs for all my risk personnel to find out upfront what are the insurance policies that are fraudulent and cancel the policies and punish the fraudsters. They go after them and then file a police complaint. Because there are a lot of frauds that occur, like dead man insurance, or a person who's sick or having cancer or is there almost dead in the hospital would be insured by somebody else. The person may not even know, and then the claim gets paid sometimes. So you'll have to upfront look at regions, look at locations, look at branches, look at types of customers. And then if you see data patterns across the industry, that will give you lead and lag indicators, especially lead indicators. And we would exactly know where the frauds are once you start using analytics. And so we have across country about 200 locations are red zones. Like how we have COVID red and amber and green, we have similarly red, amber, green fraud zones also. And so we go after those fraud zones, investigate those cases. So my investigation KPI, again, the RTO is very good. So if I say spend 60 lakhs, I must save about 40 crores per year. That's the kind of saving you get when you use data analytics, and you use SAS to harness data, enrich, and then the industry, we also now use the repository. So now with COVID, my investigators cannot do field investigation, but what we do is we aid the database, feed the data repository and try and harness that. We are just waiting for LIC to join us. Once LIC joins us, then the data would become really rich. But of course, it's national security and challenges of data, etc. are there. So LIC is part of the committee, and we're privileged to have them, but they would share eventually data once a national infrastructure comes up in a very reliable manner for them. Otherwise, the private insurance companies have already joined together.
And in the case of RBI, of course, there has been a lot of hesitation on the part of RBI to share frauds, information on fraud, individual frauds, because of Secrecy Act, Banking Secrecy Act, and so on and so forth. But with a series of major frauds and increased cyber fraud, in fact, there is an announcement on April 5th that RBI is setting up a separate wing for an entire monitoring of frauds in the banking sector. And they have also assured that there'll be a lot of exchange of information going to happen in the days to come. And without, of course, RBI sharing, the information is now available with one of the credit bureau. They have a separate information on the fraud list, and many banks are members of that. It is known as Hunter. So similarly, RBI, both CRILIC as well as the Central Fraud Registry is available to all the bankers. So they have access to a lot of granular details which is not published. So in the days to come, I think RBI is going to strengthen the monitoring as well as sharing of information on frauds. Thank you.
Yeah, sir, you may be surprised, even insurance industry uses the life insurance councils chose Hunter, so Experian.
That is expected now.
Yeah, and then we've also set up in India Insurance Bureau, IIB,
Yeah.
in Hyderabad. So that's what we're doing. And it's very useful, especially now, because now my field investigators cannot go anywhere because of COVID and lockdown.
So to reply to Ashok Pradhan, see, a couple of things. One is whether it is a fraud or it is money laundering. It is not question of law. It is a question of facts. Whenever there is a question of facts, investigation has to take place. Prosecution has to take place proportionate to the losses which have been incurred. So it will not be, it is not that on complaint itself it is actionable. Compare it against the criminal provisions, where against complaint it is actually actionable. That is number one. Number two, as we are seeing, even organizations, they actually are started getting those skills for fraud prevention. It will take some time before the enforcement agencies, they also acquire those skills and they actually implement. So there are various, we know that every enforcement agency, they have set up those cells and they actually are trying to do it, but it will take some time before they actually get skills and so on and so forth. So one of the things which probably as an ISACA we can take it upon ourselves is that how do we educate them, how do we skill them so that they actually acquire those skills and they are able to attend to our complaints, etc., all the enforcement agencies and so on and so forth. Do reported cyber frauds are being taken into consideration for banks to building ecosystem to minimize fraud? See, as I said, that calibration is one of the key thing. Calibration is one of the key thing. And if we actually improve the calibration, then only we can say that the existing frauds are considered. It means that if the similar pattern happens again, we'll be able to detect before fraud has taken place, and we'll be able to prevent from happening it. Sandrakrishna, would you like to take some of the questions which are directed towards you?
Yeah, I launched the poll also on cyber analytics.
Yes. Which are the questions posed to me, sir?
No, I saw you said good evening or something.
Yeah. So SOC is very useful, security on call. And on the ATM, I do agree that many ATMs were using outdated technology from a security angle, but they've upgraded that. Some of the banks have upgraded already. The other problem, of course, we face is ransomware attacks and malware attacks. Ransomware attacks, especially last 2 years, and malware attacks have gone up like crazy. Certain is also quite active. We get guidance and we also report to Certain. I'm in touch with many of my banking colleagues, and I think many of us are getting attacked on the ransomware side. And therefore, we have to be very, very careful, because if you lose some devices or some technology for even some few hours, it's a reputation issue. Therefore, the redundancies are being built by many, and also we have to combat this ransomware attack. Ransomware attack, I don't know whether it's a fraud or a cyber attack or both, because they ask you ransom or the money or the compensation for creating the attack. And then, of course,
yeah, recently even Cognizant had ransomware.
Yes. And Cognizant again is a 24/7 critical supplier of services to the banking world. And some of the services were lost for some time. So yes, it's a very big issue. And I think we are all getting together to not only set defense in depth, but also with work from home coming, it has thrown many new challenges. What happens to desktop, laptops, a person alone who want to log in? How do you do the security for that? How do you ensure somebody who's out of the security zone comes into the security zone immediately? The hardening happens in the desktops and laptops without causing nuisance. Is all the problems are challenged? And what happens to the shadow IT that happens, like Zoom sessions? Zoom is a problem from a security side, which is what the government warning said. And then, of course, now they've come up with some kind of mitigation measure for that, wherein they give you ID and a password and a secure zone. So like the one that we are using now. And so there are challenges in work from home scenario, and fraudsters can take advantage of that. And therefore you need to be very careful. If you get a call from a stranger and suddenly you get a SMS, then you know there is some problem. And then if you click the SMS, the entire mobile information is out to the fraudster. So you'll have to be careful, aware. I could keep separate laptops for home and office, separate mobiles, and therefore you'll have to build in redundancies at home also. What happens to people who've taken the desktops, laptops? Of course, most of those have run to the challenge, and it was like a war footing exercise, and hardened those before they take so that the data is encrypted in the devices. Having said that, still there are issues or risk issues, so you'll have to be mindful of that. With that, I hand over it to Mr. Bhatia again.
Thank you. Pradeep, can you go to the next slide? So by the time Pradeep goes to the next slide, let me take this Swiss bank question. See, the thing is that every country has got a privacy laws. Those privacy laws, it is not that they had a better privacy laws in Swiss. What was happening is that they were not doing the KYC previously. They were not finding out. Say, for example, when we say KYC, we should know who is the ultimate beneficiary owner for that account. That ultimately beneficiary owner was not getting determined in most of the jurisdiction. What is happening is in India introduced this KYC etc. in 1974 because of the frauds in the banking sector etc. And we had that photo and signature etc. But that type of thing was not there, and it was not there in Swiss. But since 2015 onwards, Swiss laws are as same as our own laws. So, but the thing is that there is always privacy between the relationship in the bank versus the customer. That privacy can be only broken if there is a legislation to support it. For example, there is a BFSI Act in US through which they are actually able to break that privacy. And then there is a requirement for sharing that data across the geographies, across the jurisdiction. So we actually are governed by that law, where that what data can be shared and what data cannot be shared. But here we are not talking about AML and money laundering. Here we actually are talking about fraud, which is basically the criminal cases. But the thing is that, as I said, it takes time to prove that it was a criminal cases, and nowhere in the world they have said that a fraud complaint will be taken directly as a crime. So it has to go through that process. What does it mean is that there is a process which is getting improved with the banks, with the financial institution, with the insurance firm, as Mr. Sundarkrishna was explaining, that they have improved upon that process. They have got into that. They have got into integration, APIs, data sharing, creating that entire thing. That is creating opportunity for ISACA members. That is the opportunity which look at. If banks are going to set up what insurance firms have set up, what type of opportunity, what type of numbers, what type of skills banks will need. If banks will start sharing the data among themselves, if banks is going and setting up that data, if Reserve Bank of India, that next committee which is talking about sharing of data, it comes through. If SFIO is allowing banks to share data against some protection, look at those opportunities and let us start looking at and preparing with the skills That is what my submission members here who are attending here. So coming back to fraud risk models for the banks. Fraud risk is an operational risk. So there is a probability of fraud, there is impact of the fraud. What we multiply probability by impact, and we call it actually as a fraud risk. Probability of fraud is actually determined by the cyber risk measures. Cyber risk measures, we are reducing the fraud risk. We are reducing the probability, the incident, the frequency of risk. And then there are risk profiles. So every product actually has got a different risk profile. When we talk about fraud, where is the most fraud happening? Most fraud are happening in the credit card. Why is that credit card fraud are happening? Because fraudulent people, they go and buy the credit card. Then there is a hand in glove with the merchant. Merchant comes out with so many schemes and they actually try to fool around with the system. And then people who are actually in the credit card, they are not so much attentive. So credit card inherent risk is very different from a deposit inherent risk. Credit card inherent risk is very different from debit card inherent risk. Debit card inherent risk is very different from POS inherent risk, etc. So everywhere we need to actually look at what are those processes, what are the motivations, who are the actors who are working with it, who are the actors who are actually dealing with it, and so on and so forth. So whenever basically, for example, a withdrawal is happening, a large withdrawal is happening, a large withdrawal happening for a card and a credit card, large withdrawal happening with the deposit, both of them will not have the same risk profile. Their risk profile will be different. And if you are able to build models which is differentiating the risk profile according to product, we will be able to create the better calibration, and we will be able to create the better way to deal with the risk. So what we are basically saying is that look at the frequency, look at the impact, and see how can we reduce the fraud risk. I'll take pause here.
I just thought I would add the fraud. Also, fraudsters also get these data on people in the darknet, and especially credit cards. So they buy the credit card data, and then that's how they use, and that's how the frauds get propagated. So especially in the attacks of last 2 years, a lot of data has got leaked out to darknet. And therefore, now what cyber security professionals of most large enterprises do is they do this dark net tracing, and then try and see whether their customers' data is there, and then try and mitigate and ask the customers to change the password, change the card, etc. Like if you go abroad, you must, before going, change your cards. Of course, now nobody thinks of going abroad in the COVID scenario, but an advice is to change the card so that you protected from the darknet. Mr. Mohan, you want to cover skimming frauds in ATMs, mitigation of that? There is a question post out on that.
Yeah, parallelly, I'll just launch the poll till Mr. Mohan comes back.
Okay. So the skimming frauds in ATM by and large come down because of various mitigation measures taken by banks. Very rarely now I hear of ATM skimming fraud. Those days are over, looks like, because of photographs, because of camera, because of changing the machines, changing the card. That's lesser and lesser and lesser.
Yeah, I also agree that skimming frauds have come down in the recent period. Many banks are now monitoring almost 24/7 through surveillance or other methods. And many banks could prevent fraud attack on ATM using these surveillance systems.
See, what happened was that when this demonetization took place, they went and upgraded a lot of their ATMs because of this currency of 2000. As a part of that, they have actually upgraded their ATMs, and because of that upgradation, where ATMs used to be dispenser and were not having that intelligence, now nobody can open that ATM machine and can install anything, etc. And as Mr. Gopalakrishna said, there is a surveillance which is actually now imposed. So you will always find a watchman and cameras and other things, etc. So that nobody any touches basically or make any changes in that ATM. Other thing is that over a period of time, the application providers as well as the machine provider, as well as those who are feeding machine, etc., all of them actually have taken various measures for this. So that as Mr. Sundar Krishnan said, that skimming fraud actually have come down substantially. How to fight cyber risk post COVID-19? See, what is happening is that look at what is at present we are doing. At present, all sharing is actually on the peripheral. What we are doing is we actually do sharing in terms of videos, etc., or in terms of screens, or in terms of L1 support, etc., and all those type of things. In case the work from home has to really work, what is needed? The needed is that we need to create that foolproof system where you can create that foolproof system at home when you are working from home, and that level of access control which is required to be imposed to the granular most level has to map with the requirements. So going forward, at present it is an emergency case, work from home is very good, etc. People are doing it, but post COVID there is going to be a substantial amount of investment which may happen in this area, where the level where the access control implementation will be granularized. That is number one. And we are actually on Zoom, and you know that what is happening in Zoom and all those type of things. There will be Trojan horses, etc. So there will be a entire quest to remove Trojan horse from the system, which will be used actually for sharing, or which will be used for remote working and so on and so forth.
You must already hired an expert, hacker and security expert to fix the vulnerabilities.
Okay.
Want to cover?
So let me go to the next one. My next slide. So Pradeep, can you go to the next slide?
Yeah, I have done that. Are you able to see?
I'm on the fraud risk models only.
Not yet. Pradeep, not yet.
Okay.
It's locked.
Pradeep, you are there?
Yeah, I'm there. Just give me a minute.
Maybe you have to go to the
moving forward.
Non-presentation mode. You go and then you move in.
Stop share. Okay.
And I'm not able to see this chat.
He's sharing here. Yep.
Give me a minute. I think some problem with the sharing.
Mr. Mohan, there is a question on tapping of cards. Use of payment by tapping Wi-Fi enabled cards. How can it be mitigated? What can be a risk due to use of payment by tapping the credit cards, Wi-Fi enabled cards, and how can it be mitigated?
See,
The simplest method shared was to disable Wi-Fi.
No, one more thing can be actually go for the 2-factor or 3-factor authentication, which is made compulsory. If only card is sufficient, then only there can be some problem. But if you are putting card as well as an ID, or you are putting card as well as phone, then that can be actually handled, because 2-factor authentication is mandatory now as a part of PSD2 in Europe. So coming back to leveraging this risk profiles, see what is happening is that this risk profiles, they need to be updated. Now, generally, when we talk about fraud and when we talk about cyber, we only talk about transactions, but not the activities. For example, change in password, change in address, change in email address, telephone numbers, change in statement address, enrollment for electronic delivery, etc. Or whenever the customer is opting out or opting in, or it is changing card, terminating IDs, activating IDs, etc. Or it is actually making addition, deletion into account, putting power of attorney, etc. and so on and so forth. This actually changes the risk profile. It changes the risk profile of the customer. It changes the risk profile of account. It changes the relationship of that account and customer with all the link analysis and so on and so forth. So what is happening is that if, and in the existing solutions, or in the existing, many of the existing fraud detection models, this change in the profile is not captured, or it is not acted upon, or the link analysis is not complete, or the existing applications, existing fraud detection applications are not built to consider all the things which we just mentioned about changing the activities and so on and so forth. So what does it actually mean? Basically is that ID theft is not detected. What is ID theft? That somebody else is impersonating and that somebody else is actually using it. And we know that all the phishing and other thing is basically to do that, to implement that, to leverage that ID theft, etc. So account gets actually taken over, and that fraudulent person may not be having all the access. What it does is that he has made some hole into it. He actually changes some of the information, and because our fraud modules are not built for that, then further once he start receiving that connection with the bank, etc., then he goes and changes the remaining information and so on and so forth. So the existing models actually are not built for changes in the risk profiling, and then they need to be upgraded. What we are seeing is that banks actually have started rebuilding their models. Banks have started rebuilding their models to consider the risk profile. So we actually talked about cyber risk, and we talked about risk profile. We talked about risk profile of the product. We are talking about risk profile of people, account, customer, and merchants and their relationship, and doing that entire link analysis and so on and so forth. So I'll take pause here. I don't know whether there are some questions which have come.
Yeah, Mr. Mohan, shall I take a parallel poll on the fraud detection models?
Yes, sir, please.
Yeah.
Is somebody in the panel aware of what happened to Cosmos Bank? Did they get the insurance compensation? is the question. Then I'm not exactly aware whether they had insurance and they got the insurance compensation. I know that many banks have got insurance.
Most of the commercial banks have insurance, cybersecurity insurance, but I'm not sure whether Cosmos.
Yeah.
Not that 100 crore, almost 100 crore. I think.
Yeah.
Pradeep sir, can you go to the next slide? So as I said, even products are different. Electronic payment card is different, real-time payments are different, debit card, credit card are different, deposit are different, bills payment are different, POS are different. What does it mean? Basically is that you require different models for each of this product. At present, all the products which are available are focusing more and more on the credit card. The real-time payment is a 2017 phenomena in 80% of the economy of the world, because US and UK and Europe have implemented real-time payment in last 3-4 years. They have actually made the faster payment and brought electronic payment into real time. They are reinventing check with the changes which we have done with the image processing, etc. There is a change. With the focus on the bill payment and on the POS, the new models actually are getting built and are getting implemented. So, and this product actually have got the different models. They are different calibration, different solution, different product solution, and so on and so forth. Pradeep sir, next. Is there any question? Because I'm not able to see this chat question. It has got stuck in my screen.
Yeah, Mohan sir, there is a poll which has been shared. You asked for,
I saw that poll.
Yeah. So
That is
59%, 56% says no.
So the thing is, this is a new phenomena. So when we were discussing about this session, the primary reason why we are conducting this session is only this, that banks are on the verge of integrating cyber risk with fraud. They are not implemented. So it is not surprise that cyber risk analytics and fraud actually is not integrated. It is not integrated anywhere. Only exception is insurance industry and Mr. Sundarkrishnan, who has gone and implemented and integrated and has brought them together. In the banking industry, it is basically completely two different things. So as Pradeep sir was also saying, organizational wise, they are different. So if you look at cyber, it comes part of security. If you look at fraud, it comes part of operations. If you look at AML, it comes part of compliance. Security, sometimes it reports to CRO, but in banking industry, still it has to report to CRO. So Gopalakrishna sahab, whether security officer in banks, they have started reporting to CRO?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Many CISOs report to CROs now.
In banking also?
Yeah.
Okay. So security has come to the CRO, compliance is separate, and fraud is also coming to CRO. But those organizations are still actually, as Mr. Sundarkrishna was saying, at the organization level, they are separate. So they need to now come together and virtually they need to work together. Yes, sir, please. You were saying something.
Yeah, they're all at silos now. You're right. But silo risk is a big risk. I mean, everybody is now having an island of its own without connecting the dots. And that's a problem.
Because this has still not happened in Europe and US. They are completely in three different worlds, basically. Up to the board of director, they don't report even to the same board of director. They actually are complete silos. Sorry, sir. Sundarkrishna, go ahead.
Yeah, the other question is how to mitigate SIM swap fraud.
Hello? How to mitigate SIM swap fraud?
Yeah.
Frankly, I'm not aware of this pattern. Can anyone explain? We can then make an attempt. Or Sundarkrishna, you may like to take this.
So basically, it's talking about SIM being changed. You swap the SIM of somebody, and the fraudster puts the SIM and then starts using the device. And then,
sorry, go ahead, Sumit.
Yeah, you can explain. Yeah.
So it's a sort of activity which is actually happening outside of the banking world, where you can go to a mobile vendor, you can go to them and say that my SIM is not working, get another SIM and use that SIM to do the transactions going forward. And what they typically do is that the fraudsters actually call up the person whose card they SIM card they want to use, and they tell them that your card is not working and I'm going to help you do that, share the OTP and all those second factor authentication which is required to activate it. They will use that and activate the card. So here some of the stuff is beyond the control of the bank, because the mobile operators also are one of the actors in this whole process. So that is where the challenge is, because if the mobile company gives that SIM card to the fraudster, then it is only the second factor authentication where the customer is careful and he does something, like he takes care of it, then only it can be stopped.
What the banks do is now to prevent this or mitigate this, not prevent, mitigate this is to do a email, send an email of the transaction. Also call up when the transaction volumes are higher or unusual. So this is the mitigation mechanism used.
That's correct. Yeah, we do get alerts sometimes from banks or phone. Yeah.
It's a post facto. By that time, the fraudster could definitely take away the money.
So one or two questions on this two-level authentication and tapping the card. See, what is happening is that it is basically a risk-based approach. For providing that tapping facility, banks are ready to take the risk, customers are ready to take the risk. So they are done away with the one, they are going only with the one-factor authentication. Now, which also means that the some exposed, some debited, some provided, some transferred, etc. There is a limit on that, and that's why they actually do it. Now, another question which actually has come out is that CBS. So in CBS actually can provide you a lot of hooks. We have to, as a professional, we have to design those mechanisms and applications where we can actually go and detect those PMC patterns, and we can actually avoid basically those patterns. Sir Gopalakrishna sir, there is one question for you.
Yeah. What is that one?
It disappeared actually. Somebody wrote.
Yeah.
The question is that the central SOC monitoring is supposed to be real time, 24/7.
Yes. But yeah. I made this remark even in the beginning. Although it is mandatory, many banks had delegated this. They were doing post facto after taking dump after a gap of few days. But now I think RBI and also most of the banks, some of the banks were using outsourced entities for running SOC. Now I think RBI has made it obligatory that it has to be within the bank premises and it cannot be outsourced. So these are the measures RBI has taken to ensure that SOC is really 24/7. But SOC is SOC unless you have analytics, monitoring. Even SOC cannot do anything. So it has to be 24/7, supported by cyber analytics, digital analytics. So this is not happening in a big way. I'm sure that in the days to come, this is certainly going to improve, because the digital transaction is so high now, no bank can take it for granted. So I'm saying now most of the banks are also monitoring fraud transactions on a 24/7 basis.
So for cyber analytics, what they do is they actually are going and building this threat intelligence as well as vulnerability analytics, which actually can help creating those models, because SIEM, what it collects is actually logs at the lowest level of granularity. And if we have to make it actionable, we have to do threat analysis, taking the threat intelligence, as well as we have to go and do the vulnerability, for which we will require is that positive list as well as negative list. So for positive list, in terms of what are the safe IP addresses, system, etc. Negative list in terms of what are the patterns and what are the list, etc., IP address and others, which are basically negative. Once we create that actionable, it can help us creating better fraud models. That is number one. Other is that if you have to put it through the same case management tool, then we'll be able to pin that there was a cyber attack and these are the probable people who are involved, probable devices which were involved, networks, etc., merchants, and so on and so forth, as well as when we are doing investigation for AML as well as for fraud, then we will be able to pin those together. Pradeep sir, can we go to the next slide quickly, because we are running now short of time. Pradeep, am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible, but I don't know, the screen gets stuck somewhat. I have to get out and get in.
It came, screen came.
In case? Yeah, but it is not moving forward. I'm trying to move forward. That's why I have to stop and
Mr. Prashant, have you asked all the questions?
There are few questions are there still there.
Please go ahead. We are short of time.
Okay. Next polling is on the cyber risk analytics. I'll just launch the poll. This second last poll questions.
are you able to see Mohan sir now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you project it fully?
I projected.
So here I am giving example. These are the example from some of the third-party solutions which are there for fraud detection, where they have gone and implemented the mechanism for sharing data. Now at present, this mechanism for sharing data is actually based on the contractual basis. So there are solutions where they have created that network. All the banks, all the participants who are on this network, what they do is that they send their transactions to the network, and then they get the risk score. And for making that risk score every day, at the end of the day, what they do is that all the probable fraudulent transactions and all the compromised transactions, so we can divide those transactions into three. Number one, all the transactions where police case has been filed and police has accepted that actually as a case. Other is that where police case has not yet been filed, but a bank is pursuing to file that police case. And third is the compromise. So compromised devices, compromised systems, networks, etc. All the three types of data is shared with the network. What network does is that network creates those link analysis, and it goes and updates the profile. It goes and updates the profile on cyber risk side, as well as on the merchant, customer, links, relationships, and other side. And ultimately, when transaction in anonymized form is shared with the network. So for example, for getting the risk score, PII is actually not required. And what can be done is that most of the PIIs can be generalized. For example, there is no need to send a person name to find out whether this is a fraudulent or not. And there is no need to even send the exact address, because all the risk scores can be generalized. So it can be actually created pin code wise, it can be created district wise, it can be created city wise, etc., so on and so forth. Even the sum, etc., can be put it onto some generalized format, up to 10,000, 10,000 to 100, 50,000, 50,000 to 100,000, so on and so forth. Even network and other things. So there is a lot of PII is also considered, privacy, all those requirements are considered. And ultimately banks, they share data among themselves with the network, and network gives them a lot of risk scores, and based on the risk score, they go and they actually push that risk score into their own detection model. So it is not that fraud detection is done by the network. Network only gives them the data back, the scores back, and then they can go and do the detection, because Many times you require exact address, etc. to do it. So within the bank, they may be using the PII data. Outside, they get the score and then they do it. So this is what I'm just basically trying to say, that high risk list, actually it is possible. Banks are building it, insurance firms have built it, and this is actually getting extended from credit card to the other product, to the bill product, to the debit card products, and so on and so forth. Can you go to the next one, Pradeep?
Get the result till that time. Yeah.
So as I was saying, I'm just seeing that we need to actually create the awareness about the cyber risk analytics and the opportunity it is actually opening up, and the demand which is actually coming up and this demand is going to be really very high demand going forward as we go forward with COVID and with work from home, etc., where the cyber risk needs to be converted into models and analytics so that it can be made actionable beyond basically operations management and all those type of things into the actionable and numbers and so on and so forth. Pradeep sir, I don't know whether it is not visible on this one. It is not visible actually in this one.
Are others able to see? Because it has moved in my laptop.
We are able to see. We are able to see. This is relating risk profile in detection or identifying fraudulent transactions, correct?
Yeah. I don't know. Somehow it is getting stuck.
Okay. So basically, what needs to be done is that we need to continuously measure the changes in the merchant profile and changes in the customer risk profile, because every day new calibration has to take place, because as you know, in Hindi they say, no, किसी के मन के ऊपर कोई विश्वास नहीं है. So when the customer whose profile was better, was good, etc., will change to the worst one, when the merchant profile will change to the worst one. So basically that needs to be done actually more frequent at more frequent way, and then we need to continuously do that profiling and do the measurement. So actually, as a part of my discussion, we also talked about how this is implemented for the credit card. Otherwise, I wanted to take this actually as a separate case study, but I think we discussed that. Pradeep sir, go to the next slide.
Yeah, this is the last slide.
Yes. So as I said,
credit card fraud.
Yes.
Case study, credit card fraud.
Yeah, this is what we actually discussed as part of that
thing. Yeah. That this credit card companies, they actually share the data, etc., and so on and so forth. So what they do share is that they share the anonymized data, as well as they share the profile, and they do the generalization and then do it. And as I said, as a part of that GDPR requirement, a lot of things are shared as a part of AML also. So in AML also, we require links, we require where the data is flowing, where the money is flowing, where what type of merchants and customers and transactions are in cash, they are across the border, they are in wire, they are in the correspondent banking, and so on and so forth. And also, because money fraud is a type of money laundering, it actually gets reported also. It can also get reported as a money laundering. So in case US as well as in Europe, the money laundering reporting, the SAR reporting, as well as fraud reporting, it is to the same authority in the same format, and it is published together. While in India also, the FIU reporting covers both the fraud reporting as well as the money laundering reporting.
Yeah, Mr. Mohan, I launched the last poll.
Yes, please.
There is a follow-up question on the CBS. So the question is that, are there any analytics on CBS? And is there any regulatory guidelines for that?
So what is happening is that regulatory guidelines are there to go and build the early warning signals. Now, there are 42 use cases which Reserve Bank of India has published as a part of early warning signal. And some of them actually around, I think 14 or 13 can be related to basically fraud, and specifically with the collateral fraud or with the credit fraud or with diversion of funds, etc. And as Mr. Gopalakrishna was saying, that diversion of fund is also taken actually as a within the definition of fraud, and so on and so forth. So that is one. The other is that when we talk about this cyber risk, so we need to expand the definition of core banking. So we need to cover the channel operations and all the things relating to channel also as a part of this. So core banking along with the customer attributes, along with the channel, which is basically mobile, ATM, internet banking, and so on and so forth, all the channels put together, all those attributes. On the top of it, what banks are doing, banks actually have started looking at whether they can build the cyber analytics by extracting out the logs. And we know that logs are the security log or the technology logs will be 50 to 100 times or even more than the number of transactions which are done, because every time customer takes logs in, they try to log in, time, etc. All the stems from where IP address, phone, etc. gets added. So what banks are doing is banks actually have started looking at whether they can build the cyber analytics on the logs which are collected by channels as well as by the CBS system. So for this RBI question, we'll ask Gopalakrishna sir.
Yeah, what is that question?
The question is, sir, now in RBI in recent audit has asked for integration of all critical application logs in SIEM, but we had only sys logs and audit logs in mind when we designed our SOC. So we do not have sufficient EPS and storage for including these application logs. Also, integration of application logs is difficult as application vendor does not support.
Very true.
It's a very specific problem where they have not got many logs, and they are saying vendors also are not helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So with the purpose of creating this integrated view, these logs are to be captured in CBS as well as in, I'll give you an example. I was working as a technology risk officer at Shinsai Bank, and we used to have this BCM and BCP used to be a major issue and challenge at that time, because we were actually going to the open technology, etc. So what we did was that we went and collected all the logs in all the servers so that we actually can do the prediction on the BCM. When the system is full, when storage is full, when the login is full, when the number of customers are there, when the number of logs are there, when the open threads are there, and so on and so forth. So for this, basically, we need to go and create, when we actually look at this entire architecture and the information flow. So existing one might not have built. As I said, even in Europe and US, banks have started thinking about now where they want to take the cyber risk along with the fraud, and they want to integrate. So this actually exercise has to be done by the banks.
Few months back, there were a series of frauds that were reported from Tripura.
What is the nature of frauds?
Mr. Omkar Nath, can you speak? I think he's left. So Tripura, I don't know what the frauds were reported. So yeah, maybe like Jamtara or no.
Yeah, Mrs. Sundarkrishna, you want Omkar Nath to allow them to speak?
Yeah, sure, of course.
Yeah, I'm just allowing him to speak.
Yeah, he's saying about some Tripura frauds here.
Yeah, he's on now.
The other question is skimming attack possible with chip-based cards? Mr. Bhatia?
Yeah, it is much less. Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, sir. Go ahead.
No. Yeah, as per, in fact, the entire exercise of switching over to chip-based card was that it is more safer than the strip. And I'm certainly hearing that number of frauds are less in chip-based cards.
So research is going on at the fraudsters end.
Yeah, they're much ahead of.
So existing numbers indicates that yes, it is less.
Yeah.
But ultimately, skimming means application on the ATM side.
That's true. Yeah.
So in recent times, in fact, the controls on ATM there were multiple circulars which came out actually on the cameras and the monitoring as well as the physical security and in the checks which have to be done by the staff, whether there is no skimming device which is attached and all that kind of thing.
All right. So I think come to the end. I think most questions have been answered, excepting Tripura. I think Mr. Naomkarnath is not there. So I think I'll dismiss that also. With that, it becomes my humble duty to thank the privileged esteemed speakers. I mean, we are really very esteemed panel out here. I know Mr. Mohan Bhatia is so busy globe trotting. Some days in London, some days in Singapore. Yeah. Very difficult to catch such a speaker who's developed models, fraud models, and data models and tools. And of course, we are very more.
Both ISACA and RCPA is that we can carry forward this program for organizing specific program for your members, and we are willing to talk about the modalities, how to implement. I'm sure that ISACA also will be interested in continuing this exercise further with specifics. We can go to financial fraud separately and cyber fraud separately.
Yes, surely. I mean,
support.
This was a good launcher and launching pad, and I think ISACA is really benefited and privileged to have distinguished speakers. I think we thank you for sparing your very valuable time. I think it will be really useful if we deep dive, zoom in specialized topics.
That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr.
I think Mr. Omkarnath is back.
Mr. Godbole,
yeah, I'm there.
Yeah,
sir,
please. To have such a
what I was telling that I'm audible.
Yeah, you are audible.
Yeah. So a few months back, skimming fraud happened in Tripura. Some 200 frauds happened in a span of 1.5 months.
It's really been a
that was reported to Reserve Bank of India also, and in Revit magazine Pulse also it appeared. But it is
worthwhile looking at
same type of modus operandi they are using, and they are committing the fraud. It is pity on the poor customers.
Get together with you to plan some programs for the chapter. Thank you again, and it's been wonderful. It's a wonderful session to have all four of you actually, to be here. And thank you, Sundar, for joining.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Me and joining.
So Omkarnath, we will catch up.
No problem. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You all.
Thank you all.
Thank you, ISACA, by chapter. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you also. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Mr. Kiran Bhatia raised the hand. Sir, कुछ कहना है आपको?
Now I am here. मैं हूँ.
एक मिनट.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bhatia sir, thanks for your time. Thank you.
Yeah.
Definitely, sir. Definitely. Yeah, definitely, sir. No. Thanks for your time, all of you. Thank you, sir. Yeah. Okay. सर एक भाटिया से बात कर रहा था, दूसरे भाटिया सर का फोन आया था. तो मैं वही देखा किरण का हैंड रेज हो गया, हमको अभी वो चेक करना पड़ेगा हैंड रेज का.
He was testing the system.
आई थिंक फर्नांडो, आपका जब लास्ट सेशन चल रहा था ना, तभी ओंकार नाथ जी कुछ क्वेश्चन पूछ रहे थे. आई थिंक आपको सुनाई नहीं दे रहा था, बट मेरा आपका आवाज मुझे सुनाई नहीं दे रहा था, उनका आवाज बहुत क्लियर आ रहा था मुझे.
Okay. Now it's coming clear or what? I don't know why.
नहीं, आपका आवाज बहुत ये था लाइट. कुछ ओंकार नाथ सर कुछ सवाल पूछ रहे थे, आई थिंक उसी बीच में आपका थैंक्स गिविंग का चालू हो गया.
Okay. ठीक है, it's good to see that he was there on the.
Yeah. Hello. Yes.
Kiran, why did you put your hand up?
Yes. हेलो. हाँ, मिस्टर प्रदीप गोडबोले का फोन आया था.
फोन काय के लिए?
नहीं, वही सेशन अच्छा था करके. एंड वो उनका वही कहना था कि हम लोग एक दो ही पोल का क्वेश्चन एड्रेस कर सके, बट हमको बहुत सारे क्वेश्चंस एड्रेस करने का था करके. मतलब ठीक है, चलेगा.
ठीक है. I mean, generally the feedback has been good.
अभी भी 21 attendees है.
ठीक है.
ओके, चलो मैं मीटिंग एंड कर रहा हूँ. थैंक यू.
बाय.